With an active sovereign portfolio of $82.2 billion and 666 projects spanning all sectors, it is very important that we drill deeper into portfolio indicators and use this forum to discuss our findings and resolve to take forward the lessons that we learn.
In a couple of years, maybe a decade and a half, we'll all be living in urban centers. The way forward must be to plan new cities properly, make them smarter, greener, more resilient, but at the same time also allow for existing cities to be renewed.
The first, deepen the understanding on the linkage between project readiness and implementation performance. Second, enhance the knowledge on sector-specific challenges and the application of the countermeasures during project design and implementation. And the third, emphasize the importance of robust developing member country policies.
Solid project design, where planning and design are reverse engineered, which means we start with how the project is expected to be managed, maintained, and sustained. The elements and the process that support the end goal are then integrated in the project design at the beginning.
Policy dialogue with countries. In ADB jargon, we call them country programming mission. This is, if done well, this is an opportunity, a venue for discussion. And I observe that even government looks at this as a way to get their line agencies together with them and look at how projects learn lessons from previous projects. Also try to see if there are things that can be improved. And from the ADB side, first of all, to listen and see how things can be done and change.
When it comes to project preparation, we've really learned the hard way that it's almost essential to complete detailed design before we go for financing approval. And essentially, in the Pacific, it's in everybody's interest to ensure that projects are shovel-ready once the financing is ready. And again, we do have some new instruments and facilities here at ADB, and we've taken quite a bit of advantage of the new Project Readiness financing facility, which enables us to finance work through detailed design.
Plan. Figure out your critical path. Critical path is where you put what could be delayed. You just map it all up.
Safeguards really has to be one of the cornerstones of our development projects. It's about making sure that we do the right thing. And I think for ADB, to say from my side as the Director for Safeguards, it is something that we're fully committed to.
Why does ADB invest in gender equality? Because we're interested in development, as I just mentioned. We are interested in obviously having a talented human capital pool, and we're seeing that across our country, despite ADB's been here for over 50 years, we're still seeing a lot of gender gaps.
Will our investment lock us in to future climate change issues?
Projects in technology are different than infrastructure.
If we design our projects appropriately with sustainability in mind, then we will not be a drain on public finances. So while we look at the oversight aspect, the money actually gets where it's going, the other aspect of what we look at and what is our fiduciary responsibility is to ensure that we don't in turn develop projects or make investments that end up, once we leave, that are burden on the country itself.
Moving forward and to help us to achieve more, please also do your share in putting in place of enabling policies, institutions, and mechanisms to allow our support to be more efficient and effective.
Join the conversation on short to medium-term actions, policy and procedural reforms, program modalities, lending instruments, tools and methodologies. Design and implement projects that respond to the pandemic, climate risks, and rising income inequality. At the Forum on Successful Project Design and Implementation, we meet roadblocks with building blocks of results, resilience, and recovery to produce quality projects. Join us in navigating toward an inclusive and green recovery. Connect with development practitioners. View the virtual exhibits. Participate in discussions and games. Share your views using the hashtag #SuccessfulProjects. And stay engaged here at successfulprojects.adb.org. Welcome to the session, Innovation and Resilience. May we call on our facilitator, Ms. Nita Pokral, the Chief of the Water Sector Group in ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. Nita, over to you.
Good morning, afternoon, evening to you all from wherever you are joining our forum today. My name is Nita Pokral. I am the Chief of Water Sector Group in ADB and your moderator today for this discussion panel. We have distinguished panel of speakers here today where we'll be discussing the role of innovation and resilience for successful project design and implementation. What an apt and timely topic, you may say, because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. We have indeed seen some innovations, particularly on the use of ICT in project planning, project management, procurement, financial due diligence, and safeguards monitoring. But it would be fair to assume that there is a much more room for innovation and solutions. How can we scale them up, what we have seen? How can they be replicated so they can help us optimize project design and implementation that could lead to long-term reforms, not just make us resilient to pandemics and the other stress and shocks or during emergency responses? And what does project readiness look like in this new normal? Or how can we mobilize resources during a crisis so our project design and implementation remain unaffected? We will be discussing these today at the panel and more with the panel here, who I will be introducing shortly. All have years of extremely valuable project implementation and oversight responsibilities and entrenched knowledge on this topic. It is my privilege to be here with them and introduce them. If I may start with Kenichi Yokoyama, who is the Director General of our South Asia Regional Department. Welcome, Kenichi-san. He assumed office in May 2020 as the Director General of SARD. He oversees operations of 7 sector division and 6 country office in South Asia region, what I just call SARD. The 6 countries include Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. He has over 3 decades of experience, was also the country director of Nepal and India. And prior to joining ADB, he was with the government of Japan for 14 years. Next, if I may invite Candice. Good morning. Candice Patrice McDeegan is the country director for our Azerbaijan resident mission in ADB's Central and West Asia department. Candice is a qualified lawyer and the country director and has over 20 years of diverse international private and development experience. Thank you for joining us, Candice. Next, I would like to invite Thomas Abel, who is ADB's Chief of Digital Technology Unit and Advisor. The unit that Thomas heads promotes effective use of digital technology across ADB's programs to improve development impact. Thomas has over 30 years of professional experience in digital technology, including policy and strategy on technology, software development, and systems architecture. Welcome, Thomas. The next I would like to invite is Bala Shankara Batula Reddy. Bala, or we call him Reddy. Reddy Batula is currently the advisor and head of our Portfolio Results and Quality Control Unit in Pacific Department. He has over 27 years of professional experience in infrastructure development, from concept to commissioning, capacity development programs, project management, and portfolio management. Reddy currently manages and monitors multi-sector portfolio results and quality of operations in our Pacific Department and advises on overall operations management for results. Thank you for being here, Reddy. Last but not least, I would like to invite Mr. Prakash Ingole, who was our project in Maharashtra called Maharashtra State Road Project, and also a chief engineer there. Prakash served as project director there, and in these two roles as chief engineer and project director, and also in his previous capacity as deputy secretary for roads and superintendent engineer at the roads department. He was responsible for construction, maintenance, and administration of major infrastructure projects in India. Welcome, Prakash. So thank you all, the esteemed panelists, for joining us today. I would like to get started right away. And first question is to Kenichi-san. Kenichi-san, in the middle of this pandemic, or despite the pandemic, I should say, your department, South Asia Regional Department, has remained the largest still in ADB in terms of the volume of lending and support to our clients, and is still delivering projects with very high project readiness. So what lessons and good practices can you share with us today on improving project quality and readiness during such shocks and stresses as this recent pandemic? And to what extent do you think we have overcome the challenges thrown at us so we can say we may be resilient enough for future shocks? Over to you, Kenichi-san.
Thank you, Anita, for this intriguing question. So let me first start by saying, just where we are and what are the challenges we are facing. So South Asia has a portfolio of actually $33 billion, about 34% of ADB's portfolio, and of which we operate about 75% is already awarded and 40% is disbursed. So we used to, pre-pandemic, we are maintaining the performance of contract awards ratio about 40%, disbursement ratio is 25-26%, which I think is a reasonable performance. And this pandemic has affected our contract awards by, say, somewhere around 10%. And the disbursement to about 20%. And we are still at the midst of response and the recovery phase. And the challenge now is how we ensure the good recovery and what lessons learned reflected in the resilience system, and so that we can achieve the good results. So in that context, I would like to point out a few important lessons, what I think is learned from our response. One is we noticed tremendous opportunities and contributions of the resident mission. So HQ could not function well, so it was only this resident mission who were able to provide all this support, a tremendous workload increase. So project processing side, they helped us contacting with the executing agencies and dealing with safeguards, procurement. And the implementation side, again, monitoring the progress, health and safety standards application, and project completion review also. We are not affected by it that much. So we really saw the opportunities, use of the resident mission. We should provide more resources, human resources, and empower the resident mission. And the second point I would like to say is the usefulness of ICT systems. In the meantime, when doing the project, actually we have a capacity building center in India and Nepal. And this center has provided online sort of training for various subjects. I think they are providing 200 plus seminars per year. So that also helped quite a lot on ensuring the health and safety standards and various implementation related matters. But more than that, we are also seeing the tremendous also opportunity for utilizing ICT system. Maybe I maybe have time to cover it later, but it's not only the crisis response, but also portfolio management at large. We are going into the digitalization of the portfolio management system, but I see a very strong opportunity to really, sort of revolutionary changing the portfolio management system. So that's a second point. And thirdly, we also try to continue our efforts to simplify our procurement timeline management. So PPFD was very kind to consider, raising the ICB sort of threshold and so on, and some mechanism again using the ICT for earlier, faster clearance. So those are key lessons that I see, and now the challenge we are facing now is the managing the recovery process. And again, I think this one we are still learning a lot of lessons from the field. We have not fully recovered. So in a sense, there will be lots of learning coming out. I mean, we have to manage a time extension and price escalation and other various changes. So how we manage this process in an amicable manner effectively so that we can ensure, fastest recovery is one issue. So there could be lots of, this controversy and disputes, but I think we really need to establish a clear standard and strike a good balance between the flexibility, discipline, and the principle. So I would like to learn from the field how they are very effectively managing those issues. So I think I'll stop here, and there could be other, more issues related to, systems, resilience system reflecting these lessons and other areas like readiness and procurement planning and so on. So I will stop here for the time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kenichi-san. Indeed, we will like to come back and hear more on the ICT aspect that you mentioned and how we can take systematic approach for resilience. So we will come back. For now, I would like to go to Candice, if I may. Candice, we have all seen that some of our developing member countries were able to recommence operations quite quickly by mobilizing domestic resources when such stress and shocks, especially the pandemic, hit. But it's not uniform, and the same case across all regions. So with your experience, what challenges do you see across our regions on domestic resource mobilization? And what innovative approaches, if any, that you have seen that can be identified and implemented on this front? Thank you, Candice. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Nita. And of course, very good to see my esteemed panel members on this panel and learning quite a lot on their own experiences. I think domestic resource mobilization definitely is impacted. Not all countries were impacted in the same way with this pandemic. Some countries, of course, were affected far more deeply, and I think that the ripple effects will be felt far in the future. And I think that ADB, of course, is trying to respond to that. But I think that with domestic resource mobilization, that a large part depended on, with respect to ADB's own operations in countries where obviously we may have had more resources in some countries as opposed to others. But I would say that by and large, resource mobilization tried very hard to meet the demands that were presented at the time. Obviously, the scale of operations would be different, but the resources generally match that. But what we are seeing is that domestic resource operations were supplemented. And as we used by ICT, I mean, our virtual platform really supported the domestic endeavors, which we hadn't seen at the scale that we had seen in 2020 and 2021, as we became far more efficient in not only using those domestic resources, but corralling a number of resources which were not domestic in order to support those resources, albeit virtually. So I see that even though that there may have been challenges, there were also opportunities through the use of ICT I don't think anyone would have thought and imagined that we would have been able to achieve as much as we did in 2020 and 2021 without that. So I think that is definitely a key factor. But I think also we need to understand that this is now probably the new normal, that domestic resources will be where I think now the game has moved domestically. And I think Kenichi sort of referenced the fact that how resident missions had to fully support or even provide more support than they did in the past to support the operations of ADB in country. I don't see this going back. And, as we skill ourselves differently, as we build our resident missions expertise, or we create regional hubs which are closer to domestic issues, I think that this is something that we can learn from as being an important experience that we probably need to be a little bit closer. So I think it not only presented challenges, but opportunities and quite a lot of learning. I think because everything was happening so quickly, we were able to learn very quickly from each other. So a lot of economies of scale, just sort of driving things through. So I saw it, yes, as sometimes very, very difficult, where we didn't necessarily have the resources at hand at the time, but then suddenly the response that was needed happened, and it was by using all the resources in a more efficient manner. I just would also like to sort of, and Kenichi, I hope you don't mind on the challenges. And I think that this was such an important element as we talk about domestic resource mobilization. How are we now foreseeing the challenges? So we now had a pandemic, we had economic losses, we had many of our DMCs really encounter many, many challenges during this period at different levels. ADB was able to respond in quite a timely manner, I think, which was appreciated by many of our DMCs. But the challenges remain as we see in the future, and as the domestic sort of viewpoint is looking at issues, of health issues, potentially long-term health issues resulting from this. So food insecurity issues or water issues or whatever, resulting from climate change and how we're being impacted. So I think even more and more, a large part of what has happened, and as we talk about, innovation and resilience, I think that ADB has now become far more and we always have been, but I think it's become even more apparent. And with COP26, we have had to respond in a very different way by seeing potential a little ahead of us, what may be coming, and trying to sort of get a grip of how we will be responding to that. And that will require a different set of skills, I think, going forward domestically, as it's becoming more complex as we juggle not only in terms of sectors and themes, but they're all sort of incorporated to the issue of how we manage projects. And this will require a lot of learning from each other and different experiences. So I think that this has been a very unique time in ADB's history or present, which we have all participated in and experienced very, very differently. But one thing that we all know that we have experienced together is how we have come to try to have an understanding of this experience and our contribution and how we can try to address it. And I think never before we are seeing that convergence of everyone's effort to see how we can resolve some of these issues. So I know this is a little bit maybe different to how you expected maybe an answer on this, but I feel that the domestic resources are critical. As you talked about critical path, I think in the discussion, I was looking at the video, we are probably on that critical path, and we need to understand our roles better and ensure that we are ready to deal with the issues of the future. So thank you very much, Nita. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Candice. I just have to say that there is no prescribed answer, or this has been fascinating. And I think just your different sets of experiences and angles and set of eyes of how we look at all this. So it's brilliant. And you're absolutely right. If we did not seize this moment, this is a 1-in-100-year pandemic, if more, and we do have to reskill. We do have to relearn learning from the pandemic. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you. If I may move to Prakash now. Prakash, you have been involved in planning and implementing very large and complicated projects from the government side on the ground. I have had myself privileged to work in India for 17 years, actually longer. I was in in the country in many projects. I've visited probably most of your states. So I understand how complicated it is to do it from there. From your perspective, how can we build project readiness despite these uncertainties like the pandemics? And what innovative approaches that you see that can be taken to mitigate and to be more resilient? Thank you. Over to you, Prakash.
Thank you, Nitaji. So we are living in very uncertain times, and project readiness perhaps is the key issue for the successful implementation of any project. So what I see as a project readiness is the very first thing that comes to my mind is we have to identify the important activities in the project, prioritize them, and identify the responsible persons and build a very good team around them. And then while we are implementing the projects, we have to follow various procedures, various rules various rules. So we have to foresee that what are the things that are going to happen in the course of implementation of the project, and start the activities, follow them up till their logical completion by periodic reviews. For a state, if I want to share my experience for a state like Maharashtra, having a road network of 90,000 or 95,000 kilometers of state highways and major district roads, the project readiness would begin with the identification of a core road network, applying various important parameters, and preparing a priority list, selection of roads. When I say selection of roads, I know that how much funds I'm going to get from any multilateral firm or from the ADB. So if I have $500 million of loan and say 30% of a counterpart fund, my project size is going to be around $750 million. So when I look up to this project size, my project readiness should begin with identification of a road, how many kilometers I can do in this particular size of a fund. And then I will start preparing DPRs for, say, 3 times the length which I can do in this particular, because there are certain factors which affect the selection of the road at the end. So maybe some political exigencies or some other aspects. So my readiness for the project should be larger than what I can do in a given funds. So if I can share with you that we had a loan of $500 million. And in the first phase, we were sanctioned $177 million. So the balance was around $323 million. So in this $323 million, we could do, say, around 700 kilometers. But I have with me at this moment DPRs almost completed for 2,000 kilometers. So that is the project readiness that I am talking about. So even if I have to choose any 700 kilometers as per the priority of the government, I am sure I can do it very fast. And my DPR is almost ready. Then I can start working on the bid documents, the EPC bid documents or the authority engineers bid documents, and get them approved from the Asian Development Bank. Then, while I am doing the detailed project reports, of course, there are the social and environmental safeguards. So the project readiness will begin with the preparation of the resettlement plans, the initial environmental examination, and environmental management plans. Then the procurement activity can start simultaneously. Once the posing letter is given by the DEA, we can immediately start the procurement activities. There has to be a continuous training for this for the team that you are building. For example, while I was doing $177 million project, and there were certain engineers involved in it. But when I am going to, I know that I have to do another $323 million worth project, and those people are not involved. They are not on board at this moment. But I started involving all those people of these 2,000 kilometers of road and taking periodical meetings with them, making them understand the difference between implementation of the state projects and the projects funded by the Asian Development Bank, and making them aware that project readiness also demands land acquisition sometimes if it is at all needed, and some forest clearances, some wildlife clearances. So project readiness means that you are addressing all these aspects. For example, in one of our projects in Solapur district, we had to go to the Ministry of Environment and Forest for wildlife clearance. Immediately when that issue had cropped up, so we appointed a consultant, and I made a very small team responsible for that. Getting the clearance. We really did very well in getting the clearance from the Ministry of Environment and Forest. And I can share with you the presentation we made with the help of my team members and the consultant. The comments of the ministry was that it was the best presentation I ever made to them. So that is the sort of, because it was possible only with the involvement of the team members, the proactiveness of my staff and officers at the grassroots level. Then again, I can say that because there are in certain projects, forest land is required. So whenever the forest land is required, you have to give some compensatory land for the forest. So you have to identify the compensatory land which you can give, the land bank you can create initially only, that will enhance your project readiness. Another aspect, I know that I have to go for, I'll be implementing this another batch of $323 million. So I have to be ready for that in the sense that I have to allocate a counterpart fund in my budget for the same right in the beginning, because if I'm going to get that sanction somewhere in December, so my budget starts in the month of March only. So I have to make that budgetary provision. So these are the things which come to my mind as far as the project readiness considered. Candice.
Thank you, Prakash. You sound like an ideal client. What a privilege to have. Can you move to water sector? I support water sector. So looks like transport people have such high readiness, and please consider moving to water at some point, okay? So if I may now move to Thomas, please. Thomas, both Kenichi-san and Candice talked about the role of ICT, how important it has been, and not just in our project implementation, life in general. I mean, look at us virtually discussing this and living our lives. My 12-year-old child has been studying from home for the last nearly 2 years. So if I may ask you, what technologies do you think can revolutionize project design? Because I think we are talking about revolutionizing project design to make it pandemic proof and resilient. So what do you see as the technologies that can do that, and what would it take to scale them up also? Over to you, Thomas.
Great. Thanks, Nita, and thanks everybody for joining. I think that it's absolutely true that the pandemic has, accelerated the transition to the digital economy across the globe. And we are waiting to see what the new normal is going to look like, because we hope to be able to travel again. And there is some, tremendous value in working with people directly. But we also hope to be able to continue to be productive online and remotely and work with our resident missions very effectively using digital tools. And I think that ADB was, very lucky, and that we had an IT department that implemented Teams, for example, before the pandemic. So we were already on that and kind of ready to go. And we had the remote work and, people with laptops and everything. And I think getting our clients that way, so in some ways, building more support in so that our clients can also have the digital approaches that we have. And in some cases, even supporting connectivity, because we still know that only about half of the people in our region are even connected to the internet, so they're not even able to put their kids in school when the pandemic is preventing in-person schooling. So and I think a lot of our projects that involve infrastructure, you can add connectivity infrastructure a lot more cheaply by building it once, than building a road and then digging it back up to put in fiber later. So this is an area I think that ADB could be a leader in, to make sure that the digital infrastructure is also ramping up along with the need. But in terms of just projects, we're also seeing some very interesting outcomes. For example, in a project in Nauru was building a port infrastructure, and the pandemic prevented ADB from sending anybody there to do the monitoring of that project. So ADB PARD team hired a company to do basically drone-based project monitoring. So it's a company called Skycatch that basically does a very high-resolution drone imaging on a daily basis of the project, which provides a very detailed view of what's happening to the project day by day, and then basically makes that available very easily for project monitoring and analysis and historical assessment of what's happened. And it's kind of a whole new way of looking at projects, because now you have this massive digital repository of imagery that's actually turned into 3D models. So you have like a 3D model of your project that's every single day updated. And then you have all that data available forever. So and eventually you'll be able to use that for project planning, because you're going to have all this digital data on infrastructure projects that previously wasn't available. And it's very inexpensive too. It's just basically a drone solution that flies over the site on a daily basis and takes this imagery. And in PARD's case, they also happen to have a coastal erosion project underway, and that was adjacent. So they were just able to extend the drone to look at the coastline and gain a very detailed understanding on a daily basis of what's happening with the coastline, because this imagery is quite accurate. And this kind of thing, I think the pandemic has forced us into, but then you realize that we really should have been doing this in the first place, because it's not really the cost that's the issue. It's just that we never really had a need for it, because, we just have these massive, repositories of data. But once you have it, then you can really use it for almost like you could do new types of research on how these projects are implemented and how we can improve them. And you can start using AI, big data analysis, to identify issues automatically, rather than having to wait for something to happen and notice it weeks later. And I think these are the kinds of things that we're starting to get into. We have now within ADB a GIS working group that works on geospatial information analysis, and we're finding that more and more projects have this kind of need to really look at geospatial data more holistically, and we're trying to support that in terms of solutions that all of ADB can use consistently and leverage our data from previous projects more effectively. And then also, the concept of Earth observation beyond just drones, there's also all this new satellite technology that's evolving very rapidly to offer imagery that can be used for project planning and for design and even monitoring. Satellite imagery that can provide high resolution imagery on a daily basis. There are new forms of satellites that are doing synthetic aperture radar, basically creating 3D models that are quite accurate of the structures. And all this data is becoming available, and in some ways the science behind it isn't catching up, because the technology is moving so fast. You're getting very high resolution. You're getting multiple spectral bands of imagery. You're getting radar data and soil moisture and all kinds of sources of data from satellites that we could use almost throughout our project's life cycle. And it's just going to take us a while to figure out which ones are available for what. And we have partnerships with the various space agencies and different universities as well in this area to try to accelerate our uses. So, and I think, just in general, the concept of data analytics and using big data and, having data-driven approaches is what this pandemic has kind of allowed us to do, because it's basically forced us to basically do things from a distance, and we have to use more data then. So that's it. Thanks, Nita. Back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, the pandemic has forced us all to be rocket scientists, and it's not expensive to be rocket scientists, as you just said. The space data was always at our disposal, but we never were propelled to do it. So it is revolutionizing. Thank you. Before I move on to Reddy, because you also alerted to Nauru project, coastal project in part. I think it's Pacific, the vulnerability, the capacities. It'll be very interesting to hear. I just wanted to remind to the audience who are listening to us, it is a dialogue. Please don't forget to put your questions to our esteemed panelists. Among you, you have years and years and years of amazing experience who have been seeing projects from various different angles. So don't be shy and put your questions on the chat box on the right, and I will be sure to come around to them and ask. So now over to Reddy. Reddy, as we all know, the Pacific is particularly vulnerable to shocks and stresses. I mean, climate change is a different ballgame. How vulnerable it is to that is there, but the pandemic also has showcased that how fragile it is, and the call to action on how we need to change our operation, as Thomas just mentioned, using drones. We can't feel them, and return to businesses will not be as normal. So in Pacific's context, what measures that you see that either have already been taken or may be taken in future to incorporate into project design and implementation, and how can we learn from them? Over to you, Reddy.
Thank you, Rita. Very interesting topic, and also the area of interest to the Pacific as well. Not only Pacific, even the other countries. Maybe if you allow me, I will share my views in the perspective of project management and to achieve sustainability on these difficult times. In that, it is very important to communicate, coordinate, and collaborate among the team. When I say team, it's not just ADB, all the key stakeholders, importantly clients. We heard yesterday a Philippine client saying that preparedness of client organization to deal with shocks. And we heard today clients saying that all the requirements, how ready they need to be in order to achieve the quality infrastructure. So it's very important to communicate, coordinate, and collaborate among the teams, and to be open to the new ideas, new way of managing project, whether it is existing projects or the new projects. In that process, probably we may have to look at our own processes, support to the client. As you already said, the Pacific has unique characteristics of small nations, very low industry level and capacities. Of course, that is the foremost issue that we have been dealing with. So having seen that, how do we address this pandemic situation where travel is an issue? Because of the nature of country and situations, most of the time, clients depends on external support in terms of technology. That means external consultants, international consultants, technical support. And also because of local industry is still growing and still takes time, now we have to depend on international industry and the construction, as well as service providers. Then once travel is struck, then how do we manage? So that's why so we are looking at how do we manage the existing projects already on the ground, and how do we start preparing. The pace may be slow, but still we need to start preparing. We cannot stop, right? So when I look at managing existing projects, so the teams on the ground, all the key stakeholders, coordinating and collaborating and communicating very well to reset the project. Resetting the project means understand what resources are available from the contractor side, also limited resource, consultant also limited resources, and we are not able to travel from HQ, but we have a support from RMs, as Ken mentioned. In our case, we have RMs as a hub, and also supported by the Pacific country offices and a coordination office in each country. And they have been providing very extensive support. And so we have to recognize that. And this is the time to explore those additional responsibilities, how we can use, how we can strengthen, our colleagues on ground, close to the ground, not only to help in this pandemic, but that's how we can be close to the client. So in managing project, again, our teams are resetting the project implementation, whether it is timelines and cost requirements, and also see how we manage within our internal process, which our panelists mentioned in terms of changes and cost escalations. If cost is required, how we can support them through development partners, co-financing, or our own co-financing. We are doing some co-financing now for some of the projects where we inbuilt into the additional requirements by these pandemic situations. And in the process, we may have to see how we can augment the additional resources. That's where we are looking at local consultants, national consultants. And in this case, national consultants, I also have to say, when we say national consultant in the Pacific, it's not like other countries where you have national within the country, there are consultants. But we are also looking at sub-regional consultants where we can support within that region. So that they actually can travel to some of the countries when borders open, and then work with the limited workforce on the ground and either support international consultants and support on the contractors, clients in project management. So in the same process, as Thomas mentioned, one of the major infrastructure projects in transport, our teams again coordinated very well and collaborating extensively to find the solution. And our teams are involved in the logistics, which I don't think we have involved anything before, supporting each other, how to plan the logistics, how can we bring the contractor people to the site. And when you bring in, not just bringing in, how to manage these protocols, COVID protocols, what is the time impact, what is the cost impact. So teams are collaborating on that basis to bring in contractors, people, and also readjusting the schedules and seeing the impact on the cost. It's not just bringing in the contract people. The contractor have this shift basis. They always plan on shifts. Somebody leave the country, somebody come in. So it's not the issue of coming in, but also manage people leaving. So otherwise, the whole contractor system will pay. And similarly, international consultants have left from that site. And that's where drones comes in and to get the shots of the progress on the ground and also the material changes from the quarries. And that is linked with that. We have a digital twin technology to manage the drones monitoring to support the progress on the ground. But the thing is, we have to be careful on this application because we are changing from the usual process in terms of quality assurance, quality system. So we have to have a governance structure. How do we use this IT technology? How do we readjust the contractors' quality plan and also the client's understanding and donors' perspective in terms of whether we are getting the right data, whether the progress payments are made according to the correct data and with checks and balances. So that's where we have to readjust whole contractual matters and also the quality assurance plan when we employ new systems. So that is on the code project where we have employed drones and digital twin technology. And at the same time, we have been using drones in other infrastructure projects in energy as well as transport projects in Kiribati and Tuvalu. Some of the other innovation approaches we have been taking is cross-sectoral design and procurement. So we have tried to combine the urban projects, water supply project and energy project in the design and procurement to achieve the efficiency in the procurement and also the manage within the country to have not to avoid too many management structures when there is no people there to manage. The other one we are preparing is floating photovoltaic projects to support renewable energy. The other area I want also mention is we are also looking at advances in pavement construction, recycling the materials, and also having intelligent compaction, which supports the sustainability as well as the addressing the climate change. So before closing, I also want to mention one more example where our colleague will be presenting in the afternoon. We are also doing commissioning of the project remotely. And particularly when you install the equipment, in this case, a renewable energy project in Tonga, where we have a battery energy systems need to be tested and installed as a process of commissioning, which is a very critical, important quality assurance part of the project. So our teams, again, everybody collaborating and finding solution, how can we do remotely? So they are managing remotely through international consultants away from the site, through local consultants and clients. And that also again requires a different protocol. And if something needs to be done, that has to be done when international consultants joins the team, hopefully early next year. So meanwhile, whatever can be done remotely, being done in order to save time, so that one international consultant is on board at site, and the remaining part can be completed and rolled out. So that is on the existing project. On the new project, again, we are completely relying on the national consultants where possible, and also regional consultants and sub-regional consultants. And we also want to encourage this. We will take this opportunity to make sure that this regional technical resource is augmented for the future. That is part of the capacity development for the industry. And also they can be part of the client in terms of capacity substitution. That would be the future angle in order to manage such shocks in future, in case if it happens. So those are the initial responses from my side. Before closing, and this also have an opportunity to explore the local materials. Again, material supply also an issue, and some material has to come if it is a big quantities. Contractor plans to bring it themselves, that saves time, though cost is high. So if we are not able to bring the material, how can we source local material, particularly where it is possible? For example, like we have local materials being used for coastal protections rather than bringing heavy concrete structures from outside. So all comes from shipping, it takes time. So we have to look at other opportunities when there is a demand. So that's where it comes in. We have to be open mind, explore, and communicate the ideas, coordinate and collaborate. So to conclude, these are the 3 C's I would like to promote. Not only pandemic, I think this can be applied even in normal way in order to achieve the quality project planning, design, and implementation. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Reddy. I think really very descriptive and very full kit of toolbox and solutions and innovations. And you've touched upon, there was one question on the chat box from Samua, but I think you've already answered on what can we do to build the capacity of this, what we call ecosystem, contractors, consultants, clients, and you've already very amply touched on that. So if I may actually ask the same question, because this question was to other panelists also, to Kenichi-san, in South Asia, what can we do to, again, improve these consultants, contractors, capacities, and what has pandemic taught us for that? I mean, I actually moved to where I am from South Asia, and we also use a lot of these tools. So it'll be great to hear from Kenichi-san. Over to you, Kenichi-san.
Yeah, thank you, Nita. So how we build the capacity of the domestic contractors and consultants. Yeah, that's a very pertinent issue that we are sometimes struggling, frankly speaking. So yeah, but I think in our pandemic, not necessarily pandemic-related operations. We are increasingly, with the support of PPFD, focusing on the procurement planning. So there is this system of strategic procurement planning at the project level, but also looking at the, how best to package the procurements in a manner to best suit the local conditions. And actually, we used to not necessarily take care of this issue much, but I would say this has a tremendous, again, opportunities where we can help build the capacities of contractors. And actually, one of the projects in India, Uttarakhand, I heard, there is a water supply project forthcoming. And we used to have always an issue of, if we do the bidding, only single or 2 contractors come with very high prices. And then, we discussed what to do, rebidding or accepting this high price, negotiation. So, but a new project, we had a very thorough procurement assessment, strategic planning, and marketing opportunities assessment, and also consulting with the local contractor industries. So they changed the packaging. I think they make it a little bit bigger, and also modifies the procurement, bidding document design to address some of the local contractors industries concerned. And the end result was quite impressive. They said that 7, 8, 9 packages, all packages have multiple bidders, 5, 6, and the price was very competitive. So executing agency was very happy. So in that sense, we really need to look at this procurement planning side. What are the, fundamental challenges that we face when we have only small number of contractors with high price and so on and so forth. So that also, requires, as I said, consultation with contractors and so on. And then bidding document, we tend to have standard bidding documents and not necessarily, accommodating the local demand. But I think we really need to look at, local context and, if the many, some contractors are becoming ghost contractor, how to control. If the, all the fund is transferred to the HQ contractors headquarters doesn't come to, then maybe you should have some escrow account. So there are measures to address all these local constraints. And I think in that context, our procurement team can also regularly talk with the local consultants and contractor industries and come up with some solutions. And of course, it's not necessarily only our program, but there are issues, local practice that needs to be changed. So in that sense, in Nepal resolution, India resolution, we also undertook taking the support of OAG, auditing of the existing procurement consultant management processes. And they came up with sort of a generic action plan, short term, medium term, longer term. So that kind of exercise can also help to really, help the promotion and capacity building. And of course, there are cases like, we have a capacity building center in, as I said, India, Nepal, and extending to other countries. So our team is also looking at what to sort of awareness and capacity building. And one important function is also regularly organizing a business seminar. I'm really, of the view that there is tremendous opportunities, many more things that we can do, and urge our procurement and project management teams to look at these opportunities and help the, to make significant advancements. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenichi-san. You touched upon ghost contractors, which is always close to my heart because we joke that pandemic has really exposed the ghost contractors. They can't fly overnight and pretend they've been there all the time. And it has really exposed, it is actually the Joe blocks that they pass all the risks on to, and pandemic hit and the Joe blocks had to mop up. So it was quite interesting. Prakash, there's a question for you. If I could channel it towards your direction. With your very vast experience as ADB's client on the other side of the table, two questions. One, how do you see countries can leverage ADB's tools such as advanced contracting, retroactive financing better? And also, what are the key issues during bidding process? Kenichi-san mentioned a lot about the bidding process, using local bidding documents, streamlining these. So from your perspective, what do we need to do better in dealing with that? He also mentioned, of course, procurement planning, which will make the bidding process much more smoother. But what should we be aware of as your counterpart or government's counterpart in ADB? We have a lot of staff listening today. So thank you very much.
Yes, Nityaji, talking about the advanced contracting and the retroactive financing, it is the very significant feature of the multilateral assistance for states like us. And what I feel that to leverage these two aspects for better project implementation, the project team and the project management unit and the higher officials and the project implementation units also, PIUs also, they should be well aware of and they have the mastery, they should have the mastery of the ADB's requirements, the ADB's rules, regulations, templates that they're using. For example, in the state projects, we don't really look into the social safeguards and environmental safeguards to that extent to which the ADB requires. So that aspect has to be mastered upon by the implementing agency. Then this readiness for the environmental aspect is like the environmental management plan is an integral part of the bid document. So for advanced contracting, unless you have all those things ready, so you cannot do that. So the project implementation unit must understand the requirements of the ADB, the social, the environmental issues. They can also do gender assessment and prepare a gender action plan. And with all these things, I think the advanced contracting can be done in a very good manner. As far as talking about the retroactive financing, for which it is up to the 20% of the loan amount, the availability of the counterpart fund is the key issue here. So the state should have enough funds to spend first, then only and of course this retroactive financing is related with the advanced contracting. Unless you have the advanced contracting, you cannot spend. So though both the things are related, and I think the implementing agency must be aware of the ADB's requirements. As far as the bidding document, bidding process is considered, the Maharashtra, for example, we were the first time borrowers. We were not aware of the bidding process, what the ADB's requirements are. So we had to do a lot of, study about it, how it is going to do. And I am very happy to share here that the ADB's team really did a very good handholding and very like the Indian Resident Mission also, and the people sitting in Manila. So every time we had any issue, they were there ready to help us. So from ADB's point of view, the hand-holding of the client is very important. And I'm very happy to state here that we were very fortunate to have a very good team, very good mission leader, and all the social environmental safeguard experts, procurement experts to help us in that sense. As far as the implementation agency is considered, the bidding process, they should understand that it is a little different from what we normally have in our state. So we have only our bid documents, but while we are implementing the project with the Asian Development Bank assistance, we have those the transparency and other issues, anti-corruption issues. I'm not finding the correct word for that, so you understand what I want to talk about. So for taking on board the consultants, then you have to go for the expression of interest. Then the technical bid evaluation reports are to be submitted. Financial bid evaluation reports are to be submitted. They are to be got approved, and whatever the remarks are coming from ADB, those are to be complied with. So these aspects are not understood, means they are not in practice in the state government procurement plan. So what I did while I was implementing, I formed a small committee of my superintending engineers and executive engineers, and for their assistance, I gave a consultant who was a chartered accountant, so that the process of technical bid evaluation and financial bid evaluation was smoother. And that's how we could do. We could really procure our consultants and contractors very fast. So I think the bidding process is a little different from our state government's bidding process. So it's a continual learning also. Means it's not that you do it one time and you are done for all the time. So it's a continuous learning process. We keep learning while implementing the project. There was one part of the question is about the interaction with the contractors. So what I see here is while we are implementing the project, we have to be constantly reviewing the project progress and taking continual constant meetings with the authority engineers, with the contractors, and involving the engineers of the government. So sometimes it happens, and it is my experience, that when the authority engineer is on board, the state government engineers, they consider that it is the authority engineer is going to monitor the whole project. So at some point there is that lack of a little ownership in the project from the point of view of the government officials. So the officer should understand that it is their project and the authority engineer is there to help them. It is not the whole and sole responsibility of the authority engineer. So I made it a point that my engineers, they from the junior engineers onwards, junior engineer, deputy engineers, executive engineers, superintendent engineers, everyone is owning the project and they are really doing their bit in getting a good progress and monitoring it well with the contractor. And wherever there are the contractor is not performing well, then take the bid document is supposed to be having so many clauses that you have to invoke those clauses and get the project run as it is desired to run. Thank you, Neeta.
Thank you, Prakash, also for your inspiring words that we did not fail you and did a fair bit of hand-holding when required. So we thank you for saying that. But of course, a note to ourselves that for new clients, we do still need to do a lot of hand-holding because the bidding process is new and different, and thank you. We will do that. Now, a couple of questions for Thomas. I want to go to the lightest one first, Thomas. On the bridges, can we get data of squatters living under the bridges? That is number one. And second one, about, I think, technologies. Drone technologies are still quite expensive. And there was one, if you could, shortly, short and sweet, combine the last one also, which was on I think it was just the contractors' affordability of these technologies that you talk about. So thank you, Thomas.
All right, thanks for the question. Thanks, Neeta. So we privacy and privacy is an issue, and we generally don't want to go and look on individual homes and families with our technology. And that's actually an advantage of satellites, that it's still not really in the personally identifiable data category. And, where you would be having, if you're looking at social media data or mobile phone data or data from bank accounts, satellite data still doesn't get you that. And there's an advantage in that. But it's getting to the point where you will have enough resolution in satellite data to be able to identify, where specific, residences are housing people, and you can even get that in 3D with some of the new technologies. But I think the interesting part is, and we're actually doing some of this. You can use AI and large massive data sets to estimate poverty levels and inhabitants levels and economic activity, the structures and what uses they have. And it's not going to be accurate down to an individual point on the map, but it will be enough accuracy that you can do some interesting, economics work or project planning work on a larger scale. And then on the second one, about the cost of drones, this is definitely an issue. Drone imagery will become more regulated as drones are regulated. And what we work with the government to make sure that our drone programs have the right licensing, piloting, et cetera. And the solution I mentioned called Skycatch, they actually have their own GPS signal device that allows the drone to be much more accurately located. And if you're flying over your own project, it's a little bit less of an issue than if you're trying to capture, broad, like an entire city and that sort of thing. That's another place where satellite imagery sometimes can substitute for drones if you don't need the really detailed accuracy. And then the cost of drones and cameras and everything is obviously going down, and their effectiveness is going up. And then in terms of cost effectiveness in general for solutions, this is an issue everywhere, especially when we still don't have half of the population who have access to the internet at all. And I think we're looking, there are some breakthroughs happening. There is a history of, services, devices not being affordable to the bottom of the pyramid populations, partly because the technology evolves so fast. We're moving to 5G now, and that's more expensive than 3G, and people just don't want 3G anymore. And so we don't have an option to give the low income people cheaper technologies. But I think that is kind of changing, and we're actually doing some work in that area. We've worked with ITU, for example, looking at the example of Reliance Jio in India, where they have rolled out a very high-speed data network that's average cost of $1 per month per user, much higher data rates than what had been available at those prices in the past. We're looking at, can ADB support these types of things through policy advice and potentially investments to make sure the technologies are more available to people of marginal means. Thanks. Back to you, Nita.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, some time back when I was still in operations, I had Google and few other people come to say, wherever you're laying pipes, let us put fiber optic cables and we will not charge you anything. And we noticed many of our clients, when they were putting railway lines, they were already putting fiber optic cables, but we weren't in water sector. So much to learn. Candice, if I may come to you now, please. There was a question for you on the resource mobilization on the chat box, but also Central West region has its own challenges and peculiarities and resource constraints on multiple aspects for and characteristics for project planning and implementation. So any of these challenges, any of the questions raised that you could pick on from the Central West perspective would be great. Over to you, Candice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nita, and very, very interesting discussion and really very rich discussion. I want to just go a little bit further. I mean, we discussed the procurement planning, and Kenichi-san, absolutely, this is on something that once we improve, we can, of course, get levels of efficiency. But my question is, what happens after that? So contractors are mobilized, and I think this is where we have an area, despite very intensive project prep readiness and so on, where we can sometimes have encounter some challenges. Managing contractors and contractor performance is an area which is sometimes less within our control than the documentation side of it, which is bid preparation, bid issue, tender, and so on. We have a lot of contractors coming in, many of them trying to understand a new country, a new environment. There's no access to labor. The domestic market may not have high capacity. There may be other issues in terms of coming into the country or working in the country, which we have to sort of mitigate. So this creates as well a lot of constraints in terms of ensuring that projects continue on path and as planned. So despite all the communication coordination, there are things that, hindsight, we have 20/20 vision for hindsight, but sometimes when we actually encounter the issue, how do we problem solve at that point in dealing with many of the issues? I also want to talk about another issue that I find, the domestic market and the domestic contracting market, which is a topic that we have had for a number of years, and how we can develop that market. And as far as I'm seeing, this is actually getting worse. Finding skilled labor within countries varies. Many of our DMCs, our upper middle income countries, our bigger countries, we have far more skilled labor. Many of these countries have had many contracts, have been eligible for many contracts, are able to go overseas, develop even more expertise. And as a result, they bring their labor, because they argue that when they come to small economies, they cannot find labor, therefore they have to bring their own. So at one point, we have many of our countries developing their domestic contracting industries at a high level, but others which are not, which do not have the experience, which do not have initiatives or training or TVET programs that build skilled labor. So we have a lot of low skilled labor that cannot really transition or upscale to higher skilled labor. So therefore we have a sort of disconnect in terms of how do we build domestic industries where there is this low skilled labor, where there's not as much opportunities, where there is no TVET building that labor in, and where we have other contractors coming from other countries bringing their own skilled labor and taking it back with them, so that transference and development of skill is not happening. So we still retain a low skilled sort of element. So we see this happening on the ground, and we have to sort of be aware of when we talk about domestic industry, it's not a generic term. It's not a homogeneous term. It doesn't apply to every country. Each country is on a very different development path. And I mean, even to Thomas's point on technology, we will see that skills gap and that technology gap as well within certain countries which are able to use it, apply it, benefit from it. As a result of that, get cheaper access, and others which do not, and which sort of are the recipients of that. And will never sort of understand how they can embed that own technology into their own systems. So I think we can't sort of have this sort of very flush or innovations happening across the board. It's happening in some areas and they're benefiting, but it's not happening in others. You mentioned about, online learning. Some children had access to online learning, others did not. So we're still seeing that. And I think throughout our work, be aware that this is happening, and to be honest about it. And I do think we talk about innovation, but sometimes brass tacks matter. Education does. TVET does. How do we train people? How do we accredit labor in a way that we're moving from low skill to upskill labor? Quite often it's not seen as being the route. It's not tertiary education, but how can we bring that back as a viable option so that we can create far more solid foundations for that domestic consultant industry to draw from and get better outcomes. We don't want to say we're giving jobs to domestic consulting firms if they do not have the necessary labor to do it. So then we build in more inefficiencies if we do not. So I think looking a little bit downstream and seeing how can we build that pipeline so that domestic contractors can reap benefits from the labor force within their countries and therefore develop and upskill, I think is an area that we need to also look at. So that is it for me. Thank you very much for allowing me to contribute.
Thank you, Candice. That is very close to my heart. And I see one question which is very similar to it. And the beauty of this question, or the thing is, it also asks the moderator. Thank you very much. Moderators never really get asked. So I'm going to seize the moment and answer first. And this is not to use drones or the rocket science that Thomas talked about. So because again, the issue that the person is asking is correct. In many countries, we are still at an infant stage. There are legal issues. We cannot use drones and they're not there. So what other ICT, what can we leverage digital technology for day-to-day project monitoring? Here, I would like to share my experience, what I call the ecosystem, which is the consultants, the client, the contractor. If you look at the ecosystem, and you also touched upon it, Candice, that ecosystem we have that I see, I left private sector 20 years ago, and ever since I've joined development, it is tailored for older, more experienced people. Client, I don't want to be sexist here, but it's filled with old men. The clients are filled with old men, the contractors are filled with old men, the consultants are filled with old men. We desire that. We tailor our systems to actually, it's for want of experience. We want 30-year experience for everything. So how can we then benefit from the new technology savvy generation that can crack the nut and really bring the tools and thinking and leverage ICT, because we're not asking for it. So is it time we look at our consulting contracts, our consulting qualification criteria, our contractor qualification criteria, and also within the client? I'm an engineer. Ever since 1997, every meeting I go to, I only deal with this set of people in all 3 C's. So I think it's time to crack that nut, and TVET and education and really tailoring toward a new set of reskilled, new energy will help us leverage technology without having to rely on the rocket science and drones. So here's my answer. It's amazing that moderator's name was put there so I could answer it. But back to you, maybe Kenichi-san. What would you say? How do we? You also mentioned during your first answer that ICT usage in day-to-day project monitoring, and SARD has amazing tools, because as I said, I'm a bit biased towards SARD because I came from SARD, spent 17 years there, digging holes and implementing projects. So SARD has found some tools. Maybe if you could share with us, Kenichi-san.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, this project management digitalization is one subject that SAD is putting very much emphasis now. We have a team led by experienced PMU engineers to join this this team. ITD team to help develop this portfolio management system. So here, I think starting with actually, when I was in Nepal, just personal experience, we had this earthquake reconstruction project looking after, I think, 100 schools. And those are located in a very difficult terrain. Some of them you have to walk. There's no vehicle you can reach there. 3 days. So how we manage this project? So the solution we got is we established some kind of what we say real time or real day monitoring system using simple technology like mobile phone, photographs, and some videos, and then sending it to the project management office at the district and the headquarters. So that the team can monitor the progress every day, looking at photographs. And there's some checklists and those also information. Daily site reports also shared. And this also included some project impact and baseline information as well. So this system was very much effective. And I remember at some stage our team a few years ago posted it in ADB Today. And so there is a possibility, if using, you don't have to rely on the high technology, but available technology, start to do it. But on the other hand, some of our counterpart in India already established very sophisticated project real-time implementation monitoring, quality control, and troubleshooting mechanisms. And that's a good practice that we would really like to see every project. And particularly, I'm asking our Maharashtra transport project team leader. Maharashtra is the state that can lead such process and help other states to replicate. So in that sense, we should really, should not miss the train. We should really introduce, real-time project monitoring, implementation, support, troubleshooting systems, starting from, safeguards, land acquisition, and day-to-day contractor management. And I fully agree with Candice, having a good contractor is a fast start. We have to face lots of issues, definitely. So again, that's a separate issue. We are also facing challenges. So we need to build our own capacity and staff capacity and contractor consultants capacity to do so. So in that sense, our dream is to have such kind of a project level real-time implementation monitoring system embedded in our entire portfolio management system. But it's a very challenging task. It costs quite a lot of money, but we are starting with strengthening our departmental portfolio management dashboard. It's a simple kind of a system to start with, but also we are taking steps. Of course, EOPS is a good platform, but INDEM also established, building on the EOPS, a little bit, adding some functions to do the troubleshooting or red flagging earlier than EOPS. So there's opportunities there, and the use of EGP, of course, is also there. But also EGP, I also feel it's a very tremendous opportunities. Why don't we expand the procurement system to cover all the contractors' performance, past performance, audit records, and make it integrated system so that state level or national level. The contract monitoring, the procurement system can also look at the, contractors, financial audit record, balance sheet, and past performance, all in a transparent and accountable manner. So I see, the tremendous opportunities in the ICT, and we really need to capture these opportunities, and that I hope can lead to the Nita change of the, mail order, department head and also a contractor and the consultants and EA. So let's hope that we can change the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenichi-san. I think, sorry to say that so bluntly, but I always say, inclusiveness brings resilience. Thank you for allowing that thought to proceed. It does bring, when we are blind, when we only have one type of people and we're not resilient. We only have 6 minutes left. So if I may invite the other 4 panelists now to just say in 1.5 minutes, your 3 takeaways for successful project design and implementation, innovation and resilience that we can bring. Just to allow others, please be succinct. What can we do for that? Maybe I start with Reddy. Over to you, Reddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. Having seen all these pandemic situations, everyone needs to be resilient, open mind, explore the opportunities, how differently we can design the project. And the planning aspects are very important here, not only for ADB and the client on ground. And a realistic planning is must. No theoretical planning. And having a risk management plan at every stage of the project cycle. And when you talk about ICT, we also need to understand how far we can take ICT help. It doesn't mean that just because we are traveling, ICT will take over automatically. So we have to check and use what different tools we can employ, starting from planning to completion. Not only completion, we need to look at beyond completion and the sustainability, how client can manage the infrastructure created. So from our side, we need to look at how best we can support planning and designing and implementation of quality infrastructure with foremost important to climate change. And it has to be inbuilt in climate change sort of responsive investments need to be planned. Not only from donor side, it comes from the client. So in order to do that, we have to establish a system within the client that all their investments will pass through these best practices and across the portfolio. It is climate change, gender, and better procurement planning, and then implementation. That's where comes in the capacity development. How do we sustain the capacity development for a long term? Not just responsive on project based, it should be country specific. What does that country require? So that's where we have to look at, in order to address not only the pandemic situation, but in general for the best practices.
Beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reddy. Yes, pandemic and beyond is what we after. Over to you, Prakash, your last final takeaways for our listeners. Prakash, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yes. Talking about the pandemic, the main machinery and the material are involved in the implementation of the project. So you have to the mobility of the main was affected, and the implementation in agency and the contractors themselves have to come forward, and they had come forward during the pandemic in our projects. Like the local labors were not available. So the labors which had come from outside, they were given good facilities, like proper residences. Then the isolation beds were provided there. When doctor was associated, and positive cases were referred to the hospitals. So those kinds of things we have to take into consideration while facing this pandemic. And as far as the material part is considered, there were restrictions, a lot of restrictions on the movement of the material initially, but wherever the restrictions were lifted, then more material was procured in a shorter period of time. And whenever it was possible, the contractors themselves put up their own crushers and tried to build their material stock. As for the machinery is concerned, even the spare parts were not available at many times. So the contractors got spare parts whenever it was possible, and they made their own garages for repair garages for their equipment. So all this main material and machinery is a very important aspect, and we have to take care of all these aspects. Then awareness camps for the labor and the engineers and all the people for maintaining the social distancing and taking all the health and safety issues into consideration.
Thank you, Prakash.
So I think we have to face all these issues.
Thank you, Prakash. So preparedness, planning is what we hear. Thomas, your final 1 minute. We are already over time, but I think they will allow us 1 minute each for Thomas and Candice for your takeaways. Thank you. Over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, TJ. I'll just be quick. I think that, really focusing on data, what all the new sources of data are, and the lessons that we've experienced from the pandemic are going to take a long time to sort out. And there's a lot of local innovation that we haven't even discovered, what has happened. And we have to look at all of that. And also looking to young people, and diverse people, as you said, and a lot of those are in startups, and they're, technology-oriented companies are younger and more diverse, and sometimes we can bring those in to some of our project experiences to do some of these type of digital innovations directly. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, we need to remove the 30-year experience criteria. So thank you for saying that. Candice, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we have experienced a time of change. Now, we're always experiencing change, but we felt it more in 2020, 2021. And we need to understand that change is not in the future, it's happening now. And we need to embrace what we have learned. We have to be resilient to change. We have to be forward thinking to see what's coming. We see climate change as being a huge issue. We see gender issues. We see regional cooperation. We see all these things really now becoming the challenges of the future. And to Thomas's point, we need everyone's collective intelligence. We do not only need one subsector. We do not need development partners only. We need government counterparts, our private sector, our young people, people who are marginalized. We need to have so much more common, shared, collective knowledge to solve the problems of the future. And I'm hoping that within ADB, we can start using what we have learned, our efficiencies, and driving that knowledge together, as opposed to keeping it in different silos throughout wherever we exist. So thank you very much for that time.
Thank you, Candice, and our esteemed panelists. This has been extremely, for me, very insightful. And if I may just try to say one line, if I can, rethink, radicalize, revolutionize project design and implementation. So we are going to be pandemic proof and be able to be resilient to all sorts of shocks and stresses. Day-to-day finances being sucked away is a shock and stress, and COVID has done that. So with these 3 R's, rethink, radicalize, revolutionize, design and operations, I thank you all again. And to our audience, many thanks for your questions. Please keep engaging with us and join the rest of our forum. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us in this session. We will take a break and resume at 2:30 p.m. Manila time. Do explore the activities and resources in the forum homepage, such as the games, exhibits, and chat. You're also welcome to post your takeaways from this forum in your social media account, using the hashtag #SuccessfulProjects. See you later.